Hi and welcome to Outlaw Bookseller with me, Stephen E. Andrews, and today we're taking a quick look back at Jack Vance because I've completed my collection of first editions of the Dying Earth saga, which I'm very pleased by. And of course, as with all these things, they're all from different publishers pretty much, so they're not uniform. And I just thought we'd go through them. Now, if you're not familiar with these books, these are kind of the definitive end of time Dying Earth books where there's a mixture of science and magic, or is it? They're very influenced by Clark Ashton Smith, who's probably the true progenitor of that sort of thing. Though I would argue for the final chapter of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells is setting the scene for that. And they are very beautiful books, very elegant, full of Vance's characteristic style and verve and wit. So I always say that if Shakespeare was alive today and writing fantasy, they would be like Jack Vance's books. His prose, of course, is very, very, very fine and flavoursome, and that's really what people love about him. The plot's usually fairly minimal and quest-based, but you can't really argue with the sheer imagination, and the way they are quite funny as well. They're so great and so inventive, and they just pour down like silver, as it says, just gorgeous stuff. So here we have The Dying Earth, and this is published by Underwood Miller. And Underwood Miller are a small press by two guys who are called Underwood and Miller. And they went for many years, and they did all sorts of beautiful books. They had a real thing for Jack Vance. Loads of the Jack Vance first hardcovers, because of course they were mostly paperback originals. And this book dates back to about 1950, and it's a collection of linked short stories, which sort of are just wonderful. It's rather like when you have a pond in your garden with little tributaries that go one into the other and descend. Absolutely beautiful and really, really lovely. And that actually is a scene from the book. And the books really are that colourful. And Underwood Miller, you know, say they went for many, many years and absolutely gorgeous. And this is a royal format hardcover. Absolutely beautiful. As you can see, there's a pencil price mark in there, £30. So did pretty well on that one. I got that some time back. And this is actually a signed one because they were signed editions and trade editions, and absolutely gorgeous. Now it's got a map in it, which you don't really need. Nice solid boards, absolutely beautiful, and illustrations throughout as well by George Barr, 1976. Look at that, absolutely gorgeous. So that's The Dying Earth, which is the first one of the sequence. And there is a Gollancz fantasy masterwork of all four of them in one. But of course, it's not a tight sequence, it's just a common milieu. In the middle of the four books, the second and third, they form a sequence of a kind featuring Cougal the Clever, who's a thief, a trickster, and a rather louche fellow, and there he is. And this is the one I've just acquired, which is The Eyes of the Overworld. Again, Underwood Miller, and this is my favourite of the Dying Earth books. It's the one which is the closest to a proper novel. And it really is full of tricksy fun and huge inventiveness. And it's about a conflict between Cougal and a wizard called Ionacoku, I think it is. I could never pronounce his name. And yeah, Underwood Miller again, very beautiful. And, you know, the usual map, which is de rigueur in a fantasy novel. And this has, interestingly enough, this is stamped with the former owner has a library, his own library stamp. This embossed in, which is quite nice. I prefer that to a book plate, actually, I have to say. And again, illustrations this time by Steve Fabian, who rather reminds me of some of the illustrations of Elric done by who would have been? Let's see, James Cawthorne, possibly. Yeah, maybe. And really nice. And this is from '77. And again, this is the first hardcover edition, because there are lots of paperback originals. And bits of this appeared episodically in magazines, of course. I was very pleased to get that. And I got that from Simon Gosden at Fantastic Literature in Essex. Really beautiful, I think you'll agree, and a common format there. Moving forward to volume 3, this is Cougal Saga, which is the sequel to The Eyes of the Overworld. And this was published by Timescape in the early 80s. And as you see, it's a demi format as opposed to a royal, so it's a smaller format. These Underwood Miller royals are amongst the earliest royals out there. Royal became more of a thing in the 80s in British publishing. The royal format really came forward. Grafton and HarperCollins are very big on the royal, and it's a predominant format for sort of bestsellery type books today. Most bestsellers will tend to be in royal rather than demi. I prefer demi. Demi's my favourite hardcover format. I think it fits in the hand really nicely. And this is a continuation of The Eyes of the Overworld. Now, interestingly, these books are written in long sort of periods apart, really big gaps. But At one point, Michael Shea, the noted science fiction, fantasy and horror author, asked Jack Vance if he could write a sequel to The Eyes of the Overworld, and Vance said, yeah, please go ahead. And he produced this, The Quest for Symbolis, a quest for Symbolis, I should say. And this is a direct sequel to The Eyes of the Overworld. And it's not bad. It's dull, as you see. This is a first edition, not too hard to get. It's got more of a horror feel to it than anything Vance ever did. It has to be said. It's a lot more ghoulish and nasty. But Shea is a wonderful writer. There is a video about him on the channel, and he's becoming more and more famous now that he's dead, sadly. Again, he was influenced by Vance in terms of his elegance and wit and his sword and sorcery stories about Niftaleen, who's rather similar in many ways to Cougal. So that's something to watch out for. So that's official. But of course, when Vance wrote his own sequel to The Eyes of the Overworld, he completely ignored this. So this is more like a homage. It's not part of the actual sequence as such. Now, the toughest to obtain, and especially in good condition, of the 4 Dying Earth books is this one, Rialto the Marvellous, and this is the Seven House first hardcover. Now, Seven House is still going. Back in the 70s and 80s, they mostly did books for libraries, and as you see, this is in an even smaller format again. This is an octavo, so it's absolutely tiny. And this is the same art that the Grafton one had. And we'll just take a look at the Grafton one now, because I think the Grafton one preceded this. So let's just have a look at the Grafton UK trade one. There it is, a Dying Earth novel, says The Flash, and as you see, same cover art. And we'll have a look at the date, and let's just see. So there we are, 1984 Jack Vance, 1985 Grafton. So I think this is a paperback original in the States. And so this came a little bit later. Now, I got this some years ago. It's got a slight lean to the spine, and it wasn't too expensive, but you never ever see mint copies of this. Now, I've got it bagged, obviously, and there is scoring on there because the jacket has been laminated, but absolutely beautiful. And that's the hardest one to get. So if you can get a mint copy of that, you can get mint copies of the others, because, you know, Vance is collectible and tradable. A lot of his fans are older, selling them on. They might cost you a fair whack. That'll cost, this Dying Earth will cost you a fair whack these days, you know, and sometimes you pay a fair whack for that as well, over £100 very often. But this one is the scarcest one, and, you know, I do love this cover. It's absolutely, I do love this cover. It's absolutely fantastic. And as I say, reproduces the Grafton one from a year or so earlier. So that's something to watch out for. So there they are, all 4, but completely different covers, as you see. If you're the sort of reader or collector who obsesses about getting things in a uniform livery and format, of course, with fantasy, you're on a road to nowhere, because, you know, a lot of the time it won't happen, especially with these authors who keep pumping things out. And if you keep buying them, they'll keep writing them. Look at Raymond E. Feast, he's still writing ritual books. They just keep on and on and on and on. Stop buying them, they'll stop doing them. It's as simple as that. They'll do something else. But yeah, you can do no worse than pick up these Grafton mid-80s A format editions, which I used to sell back at the time, and I love these jackets, and this typeface is particularly beautiful. And this is the cover of the current Gollancz B format edition, which is the omnibus, but these are by far the nicest ones. Again, very hard to find in good nick, and I've been picking them up over the last few years and managed to get them all fairly recently, and I was missing Eyes of the Overworld for a long time. Absolutely fantastic. They're so beautiful. And the A format is the classic format, of course, really, for SF and fantasy. It doesn't come any better than that. So that's the closest you'll get to a uniform edition there on Jack Vance. If you haven't read these, I highly recommend them. There is going to be something on the channel in the new year about science fantasy and whether it's science fiction or fantasy, and which ones are and which ones are not, which ones are SF, which ones are fantasy. And I'm going to give you my sort of thoughts on that. It's a very thorny question, a very challenging one, but I'm determined to rise to it and let you know what I think. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I was very pleased to get that copy of Eyes of the Overworld. Very beautiful. And as I say, watch out for the Michael Shea as well. There you go. You can get all of these now. There's a project to reprint from the publisher who've got the rights from Vance's estate, but, you know, they're mostly horrible trade paperbacks. They do some of them in hardcover. They do the Dying Earth under the title Marizan the Magician, and I had a hardcover copy of that, and I passed it on to Matt at Bookpill because he loves that book and he's my mate. So hi Matt, I hope you've had a good time at Christmas. Take it easy, chum. And yeah, these are the nicest ones out there, and if you've not read these, dive in, because they really are something very special indeed. So that's Jack Vance completed. We'll now move on maybe to Thomas M Disch. So as we're doing a little editions comparison here, I thought we'd do it with one of my favourite short story collections by M Disch, Under Compulsion. And I got this from Dorset Bob's recently. I think I showed it to you in my last visit, and the haul that's on that video, so do check that out. And this is the Rupert Hart Davis hardcover first, which I've had for like forever really. And this isn't that uncommon. You might pay a fair whack for it. It's hard to find one in really good nick. So that's the one from the 60s, the UK hardcover first, and there's Tom on the back looking very urbane and cool there. And I really have a yen for Disch. I've always liked his work, and I read this year The Priest, which I hadn't read before, which is an old one, because I kind of jumped off when he went into a quasi horror phase, and I wish I'd stuck with him because he is amazing. And I'm going to read some of the ones I haven't read and reread a lot, because I do love his work. I think he's one of the very finest writers in a literary sense of the term ever to grace science fiction. He really is excellent. So there'll be a lot more about Tom Disch coming on the channel. He's a undersung genius, and he does have critical acclaim, you know, and all the right people like him, but we never hear enough about him. He's not read enough. He's fantastic and came to a very sad end. We'll talk about that another time. So this is the Panther one from the late 60s, and I'm redeveloping a thing for the what I call the Panther Oblate, which is that oval there. Remember the Pan Lozenge? I coined that term way back in sort of around about 2006, 2007, and started using it regularly, and I've used it online. It's becoming a thing now, which I'm delighted by. So I'm determined to launch the Panther Oblate, so I may start collecting those as well, or at least the ones I like, because you know me, I'm not a completist. But very recently, this week in fact, I managed to pick up this copy of Under Compulsion. Now this was the first one I had in this jacket, which looks like a Chris Foss to me, and it's a Panther one, and in Granada, so there you go, that dates to late 70s, early 80s, and fantastic. And I love that title, Under Compulsion. This is my favourite jacket of it, and I think this is about £6, and this is hard to find in good condition, but it's beautiful. It's got a bit of sort of spine fading, but it's not leaning. The paper's nice. Absolutely great. So I was really pleased with that. So if you're going to read Disch's stories, there's other collections out there, but this is a great place to start. This is sort of once he's got things going a bit. He's done quite a few stories. There's earlier collections, but he is writing these during his sort of key period where he's emerging, writing things like The Genocides, Echo Around His Bones, and Just Before Camp Concentration, which is his most livid and exciting period as a pure SF writer. So there's 3 editions from across time, just to show you the way that Under Compulsion was jacketed and marketed. I think you'll agree they're all lovely in their own way. Just to finish this, the final video of 2023, and what a vintage year it's been, with a few more little things I picked up. And I think I said this in my last video, you know, you're working in a bookshop at Christmas and everybody's buying stuff, and you just get the urge yourself and you pick things up. But I wanted to show this, which I read some time ago when it first came out, The Breach by M.T. Hill. And I mentioned it on the community page on the channel a while ago. This is something worth watching out for. This is really, really good. And I'm going to talk about that extensively in the new year, because I'm going to do a little feature on M.T. Hill, because I think he's underrated and deserves some attention. So that's coming up. And there I was in work a couple of days ago before the Christmas break, tootling around finding works for people, and I came across this. We've got a Library of America Philip K. Dick, 4 novels of the 1960s. Now, generally speaking, these are not distributed in the UK. Now, yes, you can get them online from Amazon, but you generally can't walk into a UK bookshop and get them because the copyright is held by other publishers, and obviously they're licensed to Library of America, and they're very, very nice. And so I'm just going to unwrap this now. It's got pristine shrink on it, and the reason I bought this, because I've got A First a Man in the High Castle, I have a Golags hardcover reissue of Duandra's Dream of Electric Sheep, and I've got a UK Rapp and Whitting First of Ubik, is that I don't have 3 Stigmata in hardcover, so I'm going to pop that off. And while I get that at the shrink, I'm going to talk about what was sitting next to it, which is The Wolf at the Door, which, as you see, is obviously by Gene Wolfe. And there I was, and my mate Paul in work, who looks after some of the general fiction, does some of the buying, he's a great guy. He said to me, "Oh, Steve," he said, "I found something which has really got your name on it." And I realised this had come out in the States, but I didn't realise it was coming out over here. And that's The Wolf at the Door by Gene Wolfe, and it's from Tor, and it's £25 is the UK retail price, and it's kind of a retrospective collection of his stories, which is really handsome, as you see. So I snapped that up straight away. So thanks to Paul for that. He does watch the channel now and again, I know. And we've just got the PKD out of the shrink. There we go. And I'm becoming increasingly fond of Library of America. You know, used to sell them years ago in work, and this is way back in the 80s when they were available. And let's see, we'll just let the jacket off. And they come in lovely full cloth, a little bit of gilt, really, really nice cloth. And my only problem with them really is that they are a bit canonical. That's the point of them as a publisher, is that they publish things which are in the canon of great American writing. And, you know, really, where's their Thomas M Disch is what I'm thinking. You know, where's their Thomas M Disch? Where's their Delaney? And recently, they've only started doing SF a while ago. They've done some PKD, some Ray Bradbury, Kurt Vonnegut, Ursula Le Guin. I mean, Ursula Le Guin's great, don't get me wrong, but she's flavour of the month in woke terms, so she's ideal. And they've started doing Octavia Butler, again, sadly neglected in her lifetime, but now, of course, because she's dead, black and female, you know, she's on trend and everybody's buying and reading, and nobody cared while she was alive. Were we all then, I ask myself. And so it does make me a bit angry that. So she's in the canon now, probably for the wrong reasons, even though obviously she writes really well, or she wrote really well. And Joanna Russ is in there because Joanna Russ is dead as well, and because Joanna's a feminist. And I think for me, Joanna Russ remains the most important of those writers. I prefer reading Le Guin. I like her style more, especially on the truly great stuff from the 60s and 70s. But Russ, I think, is a real game changer, you know, and I think if a lot of the young female readers now who are so purporting to be feminists would read her instead of Margaret Atwood, we'd be in a better place. We really would. But anyway, here's the PKD. The only other problem I have with Library of America is the paper tends to be very thin, like Bible paper, but very nice. They usually have introductions by Jonathan Lethem. There's a few volumes, and there's PKD with one of his pussycats there. So I was really pleased to get that. And one of the other volumes of this has No Wait for Last Year in it, which I don't have in hardcover, which I think that was a paperback original. It wasn't a hardcover, first of all. There might have been a Greg Press one later on. So there's a few things to round up the year. The collecting will continue. The SF will continue into the new year, of course. There'll be more about general fiction and cultural stuff generally. And thanks again to everybody for watching this year. And even though there'll be fewer videos in January, I'll be back into it in February. I've got to get writing in January and take some downtime, take some holiday. And thanks as always for watching, and to everybody who's super thanked, particularly, that makes a real difference to keep the channel going. So, but we should have a bit of a look more at the Gene Wolfe. Classical, handsome, simple, the sort of thing that you don't get on SF and fantasy. And it's got, let's see, plain boards, but you know, a nice job. I think slightly overpriced to 25 quid, I have to say. I think they could have done it at 22, but they know they're only the hardcore will go for it and the print run will be small, but worth looking out for. I think you agree. Bye for now.